It was my kids in Detroit that I felt like I had an impact on their lives and who they were, and was part of their journey out of poverty, part of their journey to find their greatness. And maybe they wouldn't have had that if they hadn't had a teacher like me.
Hi, everyone. This is Katana Abbott, and I want to welcome you to Smart Women Talk. Let me ask you something. Have you ever reached a point in your life where you felt an inner pull, something to do something more meaningful, something that wasn't just about success or achievement, but about impact, service, and legacy? Because many women that are at midlife and beyond, they feel this calling, but they're not always sure what path to take or even how to turn that passion into something that's real. So today, our conversation is for every woman who has felt this nudge, wondering what it might look like to follow that nudge. So I'm honored to be joined by Alexis Ramsey, CEO and Executive Director of We Care Foster Care. Today, we're talking about how purpose becomes action and what it really looks like to lead with compassion, and what women should understand when considering service and nonprofit leadership as part of their own next chapter. Alexis, welcome to Smart Women Talk.
So great to be here.
So let's start with your story. Before you became a nonprofit leader, you were actually working overseas. You started in Detroit Public Schools. You worked overseas. Can you share what experience most shaped who you are today?
I was experiencing poverty on a daily basis. I worked in Detroit Public Schools for 5 years. And in that environment, many kids only have one parent. Some don't have any parents at all. They are struggling, usually, often academically, finding the motivation to go to school. It's hard to think about school when you're thinking about when you're going to get your next meal or where you're going to sleep that night. I remember we would offer a free pancake breakfast for a standardized test day. And that was the day. 3 pancakes is all it took to get pretty much everyone to come to school. Poverty in Detroit is a significant factor. I worked there, and then I ended up moving to Malawi in Southeast Africa with Reverend Leon Sullivan with USAID, and Malawi was having its first democratically elected president. And when he came into office, he promised free primary education to all of his citizens. And Malawi at that time was the poorest country in the world that wasn't at war. So poverty looked very different there. And so that's been a big thing that I've taken away from being here and living abroad, is how different poverty looks from one place to another. So here in Detroit, kids are struggling to get to school. There's significant truancy. But in Malawi, when they had school for the first time, there would be hundreds and hundreds of kids that would show up, and not just children. 35-year-olds would show up for kindergarten because they didn't have education before that. There weren't enough notebooks, so kids would rip the notebook in half to have a notebook for each class, or they would get a stick and they would write in the ground. And you could have hundreds of kids and adults learning, and it would be completely silent, kids hanging on every single word.
Wow.
Yeah. There's also a sadness in the poverty that's here in America. There's a dangerous element to the poverty here in America. I actually lived in Mbeki in a village in Malawi, and I had to walk 10 kilometers to get to the main road. I didn't have a lock on my door. I would see kids playing in one Coke bottle, and they're laughing and having so much fun. I think that all children, no matter where they're from, they need to have purpose and belonging. Right? So if you were in Malawi, a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old would walk to the borehole to get water every day and bring it back to their family. That gave them purpose and belonging and a place to fit in, even amongst the poverty. So there was happiness, there was joy, whereas I'm not quite sure about some of that purpose and belonging here in American poverty.
And so why do you think that is?
I think it's relationship based. right? So even the poverty that I would see in Malawi, there was a family unit there. There was the mom, usually the dad, there was the aunts and the uncles. There was a community that was supporting the child. Whereas here, I think that's often lacking. Sometimes the parents are divorced or separated. Maybe a parent has died because of some kind of violent interaction. Sometimes that happens right in front of the children. The children in Malawi weren't worrying about their safety on a daily basis. I remember when I lived in Detroit, I was hearing gunshots on a nightly basis when I was going to sleep. So it's that relationship, that being able to see someone, to look up to, knowing that there's someone there for you. And what I loved was often I could be that person as a teacher for the kids who didn't have somebody.
So was there a moment when this light went off and it switched from a career to a calling, or was it always there?
I think that it was in some ways always there. I come from a long line of family members who are community servants. My grandmother started off as a chemist, and then she became a social worker. My mom is a lawyer. She worked in juvenile court, and now she's a judge in adult court. I actually started as a genetic engineer and became a teacher. I just think it's in the family to give back to the community. It's how I was raised. It's how I'm raising my own children.
So your background is
science and math. That's right. Yep.
And you could have gone that path.
I did go that path. I went to the University of Michigan. I majored in pure math and microbiology and LS&A. And I was actually working on the Human Genome Project, doing grunt work. I was an organic chemistry TA as an undergraduate, which was quite unusual at the time. And I was well on my way to a master's program and a PhD program. And then at the very end, to my mom's dismay, I was like, actually, I'm really loving tutoring and I'm really loving teaching organic chemistry. And I talked to my counselor and I can just stay for one more semester and I can get an education certificate. So I did.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, is that what you were teaching, is math, or did you just have to teach all the curriculum to the students because it was elementary?
Oh, in Detroit public schools?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I taught high school.
Oh, you taught high school. Okay, of course you would.
Yeah, mostly 11th grade and 12th grade math. They actually didn't need me as a science teacher, so I was hired as a math teacher there.
A lot of our audience is midlife women. And so often we've spent our whole life putting everyone first. And what we want quite often has been put on the back burner. So then at midlife, a lot of women have this calling to do something more meaningful, something that they've always wanted to do. And then because of the point in their career and their families, they finally have that opportunity. So what advice would you give to women that are in midlife and that are looking at this kind of a career?
I think it's important to do things that you love. All of us, and this is something that I teach to anyone. And actually, I have taught kindergarten all the way through college level. And what I have found, no matter what age I'm teaching, and that would go beyond into midlife, of course, as well, is that we all have greatness inside of us. And finding that greatness and being true to yourself, and then using that to serve others. So I actually have my training in math and science, but I taught music, and I ended up being the head of arts for early childhood music and then elementary school. I didn't have training for that. I had training as a teacher, but I didn't have training for that specifically. I played in bands. I loved music. And what I found was that it kept me unrestricted. I didn't know exactly how music was supposed to be taught. So I did it with joy, and I didn't put limits on what the kids could learn. Oh, great. We're going to learn this song. I like to move it. Oh, this is for fourth grade or fifth grade, but I'm going to teach it to kindergarten because I believe that they can, and no one's told me differently. Yeah. So helping kids find their greatness, or having people find their greatness, and then using that to serve others and share it with others. That's what I would do.
Yeah. And what's so interesting that I've found is that we often see ourselves so much differently than others do. Others can see us, can see our power, they can see our strength and our gifts. But because of our upbringing and disempowering beliefs, a lot of times we are afraid. So, did you ever experience that? Because it looks like you were fearless.
Oh no, every single day, every single day. But what's the worst that can happen? So you make a mistake and you go back and you correct it. For me, as an educator, making a mistake in front of your students is a beautiful thing so that they see that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them and try again. I think that goes beyond the classroom.
And our mistakes are our greatest teachers. Have you taught the students that? It sounds like that's what
Absolutely.
you do.
Absolutely. And I'm experiencing that every day with leading the nonprofit We Care Foster Care. Why I went into it was because kids in foster care have the lowest graduation rate in the state of Michigan. So even though I didn't have experience in running a nonprofit, that was speaking my language. That's another piece is to find, okay, I have this passion and leaning into your strengths. So that's how I started when I took over We Care Foster Care is education is my strength. So as long as the nonprofit, if we were able to add that into our mission and I could lean into that strength that I had, I knew that I was going to be able to find my way. And what I have found is education is not enough. It's really hard to focus on linear equations or writing an essay. Like I said, when you're wondering about where you're going to eat tonight or where you're going to sleep. And through this process, I've been running We Care for 5 years now. I realized that it's housing. It's connecting education to workforce development so that the kids can see, oh, this is why I need to know this. This is why this is going to help me in my life right now. So I've leaned into something that I'm confident in and passionate about, and then learned along the way how to best serve.
That's interesting. So, how did you end up in We Care Foster Care?
I'll give you the timeline. First, I started in Detroit Public Schools for 4 or 5 years. Then I moved to Malawi. I was there for 3 years. That was with USAID first. And then I learned about international school teaching. So I worked at an international school for 2 years as well. Then I moved to China, and that was all international schools. I worked there for 8 years teaching multinationals. It was an English medium school, but I taught math there as well. And then I moved to Vietnam, and there I worked with the United Nations International School. I worked there for 10 years. So that was all of the ambassadors' kids went there, multinational kids went there. I've taught presidents' kids, embassy kids all over the world. So when I was in Vietnam, COVID hit. That was 2019. And it hit Asia first. We had our lockdown. It was very different there than it was here in the States. Lockdown meant locked down. You did not go out, you stayed in. So we had that for about 4 months. And I remember it was the winter break. And after I had been home, we went back to school and they said, the United States has COVID. And we didn't really know it here. And they anticipated that about 100,000 people were going to die in America and that the borders were going to be closed. And we all had to make a decision because we were all teaching remotely anyway. So they said, if you go back to the States or Australia, because there were teachers from all over the world, you'd have to teach at our Vietnamese hours. That could be like 3 a.m. wherever you are or whatever, but you could go home. And if you don't go home soon, you might not be able to go home. So my family had to make that decision. Myself and our 2 boys, we went back to Michigan, and my husband stayed in Vietnam because we had a dog, we had a house, we'd been living overseas for 20 years, want to lose all of the stuff that we had. So we actually were separated for about 2 years through COVID. I was in the basement at my mom's house teaching in the middle of the night because it was a 12-hour time zone difference. I was still meeting with my students. So I did that for the first, I think it was a semester, like 6 months. And then the next year, the school hired me to help with all of the kids who were all around the world from different embassies and weren't able to move as well. So I filled in the gaps for, I think it was about 8 months, talking to the Middle East, talking to Australia, talking to New Zealand, talking to China, talking to embassy families all over the world, and helping them move forward through their education while we were all in this world transition. So while I was doing that, my mom would come downstairs and she's, oh my gosh, okay, you're doing this and you're doing that. My mom is actually one of the founders of We Care Foster Care. It was started with the Third Circuit Court, and it had moved out to be its own 501c3. So she's, oh, I didn't know you can build websites. Oh, I didn't know that you could do this. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. Could you help us with our nonprofit? And COVID had really impacted We Care Foster Care. They had an amazing help closet, and because everything was locked down, that didn't happen. They had dental works. That wasn't helping because people couldn't get to the appointments. So there were a lot of problems with the nonprofit as well with the shutdown. So she asked me to volunteer. So I did.
So then what was the moment that you realized this is your calling, that you're going to be, because you stepped into a leadership position with it?
Yes, I have. Every day I get up and it doesn't feel like I'm going to work. I absolutely love what I do. And when I was living overseas, there was always a hurt every time I would get back on the plane. Now, I was teaching presidents' kids and multinationals, ambassadors, and I would always tell myself that these are the kids who are going to lead the world in the future. Mm-hmm. But it was my kids in Detroit that I felt like I had an impact on their lives and who they were, and was part of their journey out of poverty, part of their journey to find their greatness. And maybe they wouldn't have had that if they hadn't had a teacher like me. Whereas the kids at the international schools, I'm sure I had an impact and I appreciated them and I loved them very much, still do. But I just felt like they had a lot of opportunities to find their greatness. So every time I would get on the plane, I would always feel a little bit guilty that I wasn't staying here in Detroit and working with kids here that needed me. Once I started with We Care and I was volunteering, that really turned on again. And this is right where I'm supposed to be.
Interesting. This whole concept of breaking the cycle from foster care to prison. Can you share why it's so important?
The foster care to prison, the data isn't clear exactly how many people in prison spent time in foster care or child protective services. But the estimates range from 50 to 90%, depending on what site you look at, that an adult in prison, an inmate, had significant or part of their time when they were in child protective services. And actually, in Michigan, when a child, there might be human trafficking, abuse, neglect, whatever happened to get them into foster care in the first place. Once that happens, their graduation rate actually goes down. And that just breaks my heart. Right now, it's 38% of kids who are in foster care graduate on time. Wow. So it's not a big surprise to see how easily that could be. Nobody grows up saying, oh, I want to be a drug dealer. Nobody grows up saying, oh, I want to prostitute myself. Matter of fact, I have some of my fosters who actually call themselves recovering prostitutes because that's what they had to do to get shelter and to be fed or to take care of a younger sibling, right? So no one really knows what they would do if they were in a position where they had to figure out, I need to do something to feed my younger brothers and sisters. And sometimes that does result in crime and things that they're not proud of doing. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of sympathy for kids who are in foster care who are young, but then they become adolescents and then they become teens. And there's not a lot of sympathy anymore. I think that there's a real divide I believe that poverty is a choice. And poverty is a choice. Some people feel like you just need to work harder and it's your mentality and you got to pull those bootstraps up and you got to get in there. And yes, I do agree with that to some degree. But then there's also the other side of the systemic challenges. What if you don't have bootstraps to pull up? What if you weren't able to go to a school that was able to support your educational needs? Kids in Detroit, if you were to have a magic compass and you were to make a 8-mile radius, there would be over 100,000 kids in that area that don't have enough food to eat. Maybe only have one parent, if they have a parent at all. Don't know where they're going to sleep. There's about 250,000 kids in Detroit. And most of those kids live in food deserts. And when they go to the corner store to buy milk, they put their hand through 3 inches of glass. And the reason for that 3 inches of glass could walk in behind them anytime.
Yeah.
So that is where the crime element comes in. You're trying to get to school every day. There's no Detroit school buses. So a kid has to pay for the school bus to get to school. They often might be passing by somebody every single day who's saying, hey, I can help you. I can keep you warm. I can get you clothes. I can make sure you're fed. I can care for you. You just have to do this and this. How many times can you walk past that and not succumb to that? So that pathway from foster care, from poverty to prison is a really easy road. It's a real direct shot too often.
So you were able to take all those experiences you had and step into this position. And the one thing I want to point out is that a lot of people have this passion, but it takes more than just the passion to run a nonprofit. And you probably found that. What would you like to share?
Before I go into that, can I go back to one other thing about what we actually do? And then I can explain how we pay for that. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, right? Breaking again that foster care to prison pipeline, We Care Foster Care, our graduation rate has been 75% for the last 3 years, which is still not enough, but it's far better than the 38% of the state's average. Kids that have come into our care have a 75% graduation rate. How do we pay for all of that? Actually, that's one of the hardest things that I found running the nonprofit. There's not a lot of collaboration either between nonprofits. It's very isolating. At least my experience has been that. And it is because of this competition of resources and limited funding. It's been particularly difficult this last year, actually. So, yeah, I've had to learn how to write grants. I've had to learn how to have events. Fortunately, I could lean on like having assemblies, and I ran student council and things like that and ran proms. So it's not that different running an event. It's a lot of breakfasts, lunches, a lot of time talking to people, explaining what you do. But that is another system that I'm hoping to break. We are looking at building a social business, actually, a for-profit part of We Care. And we're looking at going into housing because the education piece, again, it's just not enough. We need a place to put our young adults, our kids aging out of foster care. So we're hoping to do workforce development where we're teaching skilled trades, and we'll actually partnering with a group called Ideas to Action, and they build container houses. So we're linking the education, GED, and getting a high school diploma to skilled trades, having these youth as they're aging out of foster care start working in plumbing, HVAC, insulation, hanging drywall, click together flooring, and applying skills in the skilled trades to build housing and then moving into the housing. Using Section 8 and a variety of other means, we would like to start a for-profit piece but the for-profit with a social cause. So for example, a social business came from Muhammad Yunus. He's actually the leader of Bangladesh. He won the Nobel Peace Prize and was the first person to start talking about microlending. So we're building our for-profit piece off that model. And I'm hoping to get out of the fundraising hamster wheel to be able to create our own revenue through our housing and workforce development to then support the nonprofit. So I see the nonprofit for the under 18 youth, and then for our 18 and over, they would come part of our for-profit social business.
You know what's so interesting is it had to evolve to what it is today. Mm-hmm. And I really believe in this thing of surrendering to that purpose and then trusting the process, trusting the experience, that the right people are going to come in as long as you're out there connecting and getting your mission out. Alexis, I am so proud of you and everything you've been able to do. And I was at the event where I saw all of that going on. And I really wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And if people want to learn more and connect with you, where do they go?
www.wecarefostercare.org. Please come and visit our website.
We like to end the show with a Smart Women tip. What would you leave as a tip if they're thinking of going into this nonprofit area?
Don't be afraid to fail.
I love it. Perfect. Yeah, we hit that earlier, and I think it's so true.
Don't be afraid to fail. Just try and learn from the experience and try again. Whatever your passion is, lean into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Katana.
And for everyone who is watching and you want to learn more about Smart Women's Empowerment and who we have coming to the shows and get on our mailing list for our newsletter, as well as our free online class, Unlock Your Financial Power, just go to joinsmartwomen.com. And when you do, you'll be part of that. So until our next show, go out and live with more purpose, more passion, and prosperity.